Sometimes the safest place to fall is the place you were never supposed to find. The rain felt like needles against my skin as I ran through the empty streets of Manhattan. My lungs burned. My shoes slipped against the wet sidewalk. Every breath came harder than the last. I didn't know how much farther I could go. All I knew was that stopping wasn't an option. The city blurred around me in streaks of white headlights and reflections dancing across rain-soaked pavement. My hands trembled. My vision faded at the edges. Somewhere behind me, danger still existed, even if I couldn't see it anymore. I wrapped my arms around myself and kept moving. One more block, then another, then another. The cold had settled deep into my bones. My blonde hair clung to my face. My heartbeat echoed louder than the storm. I was 26 years old, and for the first time in my life, I had absolutely nowhere left to go. That was when I saw the hotel. Moretti Grand. 40 stories of glass and gold rising into the night like a palace built for people who never worried about rent, overdue bills, or surviving until morning. Light poured from the enormous windows. Warm, safe, untouchable. I stared at it through the rain. My legs carried me toward the entrance before my mind could catch up. The revolving doors spun slowly. The marble lobby beyond looked like another world. Wealth, security, order, everything my life wasn't. I took one step inside, then another. Heat wrapped around me immediately. My body almost cried with relief. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Soft piano music floated through the air. Guests sat near a fireplace, sipping coffee and talking quietly. For one impossible second, everything felt normal. Then the room tilted. My knees weakened. The polished marble floor rushed toward me. Gasps echoed somewhere nearby. A concierge shouted for help. Someone reached toward me. The last thing I saw before darkness swallowed everything was the reflection of a massive chandelier, breaking into fragments across the floor beneath me. Upstairs, 40 floors above the lobby, Damian Moretti stood beside the floor-to-ceiling windows of his private penthouse office. New York stretched beneath him in a sea of lights. Most men admired the view. Damian watched people, opportunities, threats, patterns. The city belonged to those who understood it. A quiet knock interrupted his thoughts. His head of security stepped inside. "Sir." Damian didn't turn. "What is it?" "There's a situation in the lobby." Silence followed. Damian finally glanced toward the wall of security monitors mounted beside his desk. One screen showed the grand entrance. Another showed the reception area. A third showed a young woman collapsed on the marble floor while hotel staff gathered around her. Damian studied the image. Blonde hair, pale skin, rain-soaked clothes. Something about her didn't fit. Most people spent months saving to spend a single night inside his hotel. She looked like someone who had run through a storm just to reach the front door. "Who is she?" he asked. "We don't know yet." Damian stared at the monitor for several more seconds. The room remained silent. Then he made a decision. A simple one. The kind that changed lives without warning. His expression never moved. His voice remained calm. Cold. Absolute. "Bring her to me." I woke to the scent of clean linen and the distant sound of rain tapping softly against glass. For a moment, I thought I was home. Then I opened my eyes. Nothing about the room looked familiar. The ceiling stretched high above me. Warm amber light glowed from elegant wall fixtures. A fireplace flickered quietly across the room. Everything looked expensive, carefully chosen, perfect. Panic arrived before memory did. I sat upright too fast and immediately regretted it. The room spun. A dull ache settled behind my eyes. My pulse raced. I pushed the blankets aside and swung my feet onto the floor. The thick carpet felt softer than anything I had ever stepped on. Where was I? The last thing I remembered was the hotel lobby. The marble floor. The lights. Then darkness. A knock sounded at the door. I froze. The handle turned. A woman entered carrying a tray. She looked to be in her 50s, dressed in a tailored black uniform. "You are awake," she said with visible relief. "Please sit down before you fall over again." "Where am I?" My voice sounded weak. "You are safe." "That is not an answer." The woman offered a small smile. "You are inside the Moretti Grand." My stomach tightened instantly. Everyone in New York knew the name. The hotel appeared in magazines, celebrity interviews, business journals. People like me never belonged in places like this. "Why am I here?" I asked. Before she could answer, another voice spoke from the doorway. "Because I decided you should be." The room went silent. The woman stepped aside immediately. I looked toward the door. The man standing there seemed to absorb all the air around him. Tall, dark hair, broad shoulders beneath a charcoal suit that fit perfectly. His face belonged on the cover of a magazine. His eyes did not. They were calm, sharp, the kind of eyes that noticed everything and forgot nothing. He stepped inside without hurry. Confidence seemed to follow him naturally. I knew exactly who he was before anyone said his name. Damien Moretti, the owner of the hotel, one of the most powerful men in New York. My pulse doubled. "You should not be standing," he said. "You need rest." "I need answers." His expression never changed. "Fair enough." The woman quietly left the room, closing the door behind her. Suddenly the suite felt much smaller. Damien remained several feet away, but his presence filled every corner. "You collapsed in my lobby," he said. "My staff brought you upstairs. A doctor examined you. You were exhausted, dehydrated, and running on almost no sleep." "You had a doctor examine me?" "Yes." "Why?" His gaze settled on me for a moment. "Because leaving you on a marble floor seemed irresponsible. I should have felt grateful. Instead, unease crawled through my chest. Nothing about this felt normal. Wealthy men did not rescue strangers. Powerful men did not spend time worrying about women who stumbled into hotels. "I can leave now," I said. It came out more like a question than a statement. Damien looked toward the rain beyond the windows. Then back at me. "No," he said quietly. "Not yet." Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, but something in his voice stopped me cold. It was not a threat. It was certainty, and somehow that frightened me even more. Then his eyes shifted toward the chair beside my bed. A small leather purse sat there. Mine. Except I did not remember leaving it open. Damien followed my gaze. "There is something inside that bag," he said. "Something that explains why someone spent the entire night looking for you." I stared at the purse as if it belonged to someone else. My mouth went dry. Damien remained perfectly still across the room, watching me with those unsettling blue eyes. Every instinct told me not to touch the bag. Every instinct told me whatever was inside had already changed my life. Slowly, I reached for it. My fingers trembled against the leather strap. The zipper felt impossibly loud as I opened it. Inside were the usual things. My wallet, my phone, lip balm, a pack of gum. Then I saw it. A silver flash drive tucked into the inner pocket. My stomach dropped. I had forgotten it was there. Damien noticed the change in my expression immediately. "You recognize it," he said. It was not a question. I swallowed hard. "How do you know about this?" "Because 3 different men came looking for you last night." The room suddenly felt colder. "What did they want?" "You." His answer came without hesitation. I looked down at the flash drive. The tiny piece of metal seemed harmless. Ordinary. Yet somehow it had dragged me into the orbit of a man like Damien Moretti. "I do not understand," I whispered. "Then start from the beginning." For a moment I considered lying. But something told me he would know. Men like Damien probably built entire empires on detecting lies. I took a slow breath. "I work at St. Catherine Medical Center." He nodded once. "Listening. 3 days ago, I finished a double shift. I was leaving through the staff parking garage when I found a man sitting near the stairwell." Damien said nothing. He looked terrified. Sick. He kept asking for help. The memory returned with painful clarity. Rain. Fear. Desperation. "I called security," I continued. "But before they arrived, he handed me the flash drive." "Did he tell you what was on it?" "No, did you look?" I hesitated. "Yes." Damien's expression hardened slightly. Not anger. Calculation. And my heartbeat quickened. Names. Financial records. Transactions. Things that did not make sense. His gaze never left mine. What kind of transactions? Money moving between people who should never be connected. Silence filled the suite. The rain tapped softly against the glass. Somewhere far below, New York continued moving as if my world had not just tilted sideways. Damien finally stepped closer. Not enough to threaten. Just enough to make me aware of how serious this conversation had become. "Claire," he said quietly. Hearing my name in his voice sent a strange chill through me. "Do you know whose names are on that drive?" I shook my head. "Not all of them." He extended one hand. "Give it to me." I stared at the flash drive resting in my palm. Part of me wanted to refuse. Another part wanted to throw it out the nearest window and pretend none of this had happened. Slowly, I handed it over. Damien examined it for only a second before sliding it into his jacket pocket. His expression revealed nothing. Absolutely nothing. That frightened me more than if he had looked shocked. Then his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. For the first time since I met him, a shadow crossed his face. Not fear. Concern. He looked back at me. "It is worse than I thought," he said. "Someone already knows exactly where you are." I felt every muscle in my body tighten. The words echoed inside my head long after Damien said them. "Someone knows exactly where you are." I looked toward the massive windows overlooking Manhattan. The city suddenly seemed different. Less beautiful. Less safe. Thousands of lights stretched into the distance, but none of them felt comforting anymore. "How is that possible?" I asked. Damien slipped his phone back into his pocket. "Because people rarely search this hard unless they are afraid of what someone knows." "I do not know anything." "You know enough." The answer came immediately. Confident. Certain. I hated that certainty. I hated how calm he remained while my thoughts spiraled in a dozen directions at once. "Then I should leave." The words escaped before I could stop them. Damien studied me for several seconds. "Leave and go where?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. My apartment suddenly felt vulnerable. My job. My daily routine. Every familiar place in my life seemed exposed. "You cannot stay here forever," I said. "I am not suggesting forever." His voice softened slightly. "I am suggesting today." I folded my arms. "You are asking me to trust you." "No," his gaze never wavered. "I am asking you to survive long enough to make a better decision." The honesty caught me off guard. Most powerful men tried to persuade people. Damien simply stated facts and expected the world to adjust around them. A knock interrupted the silence. The same woman from earlier entered carrying fresh coffee and breakfast. The aroma filled the suite instantly. I realized how hungry I was. Embarrassingly hungry. The woman placed everything on a nearby table. "You should eat, Miss Bennett." I nodded automatically. "Thank you." She smiled warmly before leaving. For the first time since waking up, the room felt almost normal. Coffee, eggs, toast. Simple things. Human things. Damien remained standing near the windows, watching the rain, watching the city, watching everything. I sat down cautiously and wrapped my hands around the coffee mug. The warmth felt incredible. "Do you always rescue strangers?" I asked. The question slipped out before I could stop it. A faint smile appeared for less than a second. "No, then why me?" He looked at me. Really looked at me. "Because most people run towards safety." My heartbeat quickened. "And you looked like someone who had run out of it." The answer settled somewhere deep inside me. Unexpected. Uncomfortable. True. I glanced away first. Outside, the rain continued falling across Manhattan. Inside, the fire crackled softly. For a brief moment, I almost felt safe. Then Damien's phone vibrated again. He answered immediately. I watched the color drain from his security chief's face on the screen. Damien listened without speaking. When the call ended, the silence felt heavier than before. "What happened?" I asked. His jaw tightened slightly. "Someone broke into your apartment this morning." The coffee cup nearly slipped from my hands. "What?" "Claire," he said quietly. "You are not going anywhere." I could not breathe for a second. The words crashed into me harder than the storm outside. Someone had entered my apartment. Someone had known exactly where to look. I stared at Damien, searching for any sign that this was some kind of misunderstanding. There was none. He looked as calm as ever, but something had changed behind his eyes. The distance was gone. This was no longer a conversation about possibilities. It was reality. I slowly set the coffee cup down before I dropped it. "Did they find anything?" I asked. Damien walked toward the fireplace and rested one hand on the mantel. "According to my security team, your apartment was searched thoroughly." My stomach twisted. "My neighbors?" "Nobody saw enough to identify anyone." I looked down at my hands. They were shaking again. 24 hours ago, my biggest concern had been finishing another shift at the hospital. Now strangers were searching my home because of a flash drive I never should have accepted. "This is my fault," I whispered. No, Damien's voice cut through my thoughts immediately. "It is the fault of whoever decided to involve you." I looked up. "You keep talking like you know exactly what is happening." For the first time, he hesitated. Only for a moment. "I know enough." The answer frustrated me. Every answer seemed to create 3 new questions. Before I could press him further, another knock sounded at the door. This time Damien's expression hardened instantly. A man in a dark suit entered and crossed the room quickly. He handed Damien a tablet without saying a word. Damien studied the screen. His jaw tightened. "What?" I asked. He remained silent for several seconds. Then he turned the tablet toward me. A security camera image filled the display. The quality was grainy. Rain covered part of the lens. But I recognized the scene immediately. It was the front entrance of the Moretti Grand. My pulse quickened. What am I looking at? 10 minutes ago, Damien said quietly. Someone attempted to enter the hotel using a stolen employee credential. My mouth went dry. Why? They never reached the lobby. He paused. But they were carrying your photograph. The room seemed to tilt again. I stared at the image. The person on the screen looked ordinary. Average height. Dark jacket. Nothing memorable. Which somehow made it worse. They could have been anyone. Anywhere. This is insane, I whispered. Damien handed the tablet back to his security chief. Double the protection around this floor, he ordered. The man nodded and left immediately. I looked toward the door after he disappeared. Protection? Yes. I am not staying under guard. Damien met my gaze. You are staying alive. The certainty in his voice left no room for argument. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Inside, the fire continued to crackle softly. The contrast felt surreal. One world was warm, safe, controlled. The other was closing in around me with every passing hour. Then Damien's phone rang again. He answered, listened, said nothing. When the call ended, he looked directly at me. Claire, he said, the hospital just reported that someone has been asking questions about your schedule. The hospital, the one place that had always felt familiar, predictable, safe. Hearing that strangers were asking about my schedule felt like losing the last piece of solid ground beneath my feet. I stared at Damien, waiting for him to tell me this was some kind of mistake. He never did. The silence said enough. I slowly sat back in the chair and looked toward the rain beyond the glass. New York seemed farther away than ever. I cannot go back there, can I? I asked quietly. Damien slipped his phone into his pocket. Not today. I laughed once. A hollow sound. Yesterday I was worried about paying my electric bill. His expression softened slightly. Life changes quickly. Apparently. Another silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable this time. Just heavy. Exhaustion finally caught up with me. The adrenaline that had carried me through the last 24 hours began to fade. I rubbed my eyes and leaned back. For the first time, I noticed how tired Damien looked. Most people probably never saw it. The tailored suit. The perfect posture. The calm voice. They hid it well. But it was there. A faint shadow beneath his eyes. The tension in his shoulders. The weight of someone carrying responsibilities nobody else could see. When was the last time you slept? I asked. The question seemed to surprise him. That is an unusual thing to ask. I am a nurse. Formerly. Hopefully not permanently. A small smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. A few hours ago. That is not an answer. Neither was yours. I shook my head despite myself. Somehow, against all logic, the conversation felt normal. Human. The first normal moment since I had entered the hotel. Damien walked toward a side table and poured himself coffee. The firelight reflected against the dark fabric of his suit. You spend a lot of time taking care of strangers? He asked. It is my job. Most people only care about themselves. Most people are better than you think. He looked at me for a long moment. That belief is probably why you are in this situation. I should have been offended. Instead, I found myself smiling. Maybe. Outside, the rain finally began to weaken. The clouds drifted across the skyline. Sunlight pushed through in narrow golden beams. The city looked different. Brighter. Hopeful. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Damien reviewed information on his tablet while I finished breakfast. The strange peace almost made me forget everything happening beyond these walls. Almost. Then movement outside the suite caught my attention. Through the open doorway, I saw two young children walking down the hallway with an older woman. One of the children carried a stuffed bear nearly as large as he was. They disappeared around the corner seconds later. I blinked. There are children on this floor? Damien looked up from the tablet. Yes. Why? Because the Foundation owns 3 pediatric recovery suites here. I stared at him. The Foundation? For families who cannot afford long-term treatment in the city. The answer caught me completely off guard. Damien returned to reading as though he had said nothing unusual. But I could not stop thinking about it. Maybe because it did not fit the image I had built in my head. Maybe because for the first time, I realized there might be more to Damien Moretti than the world believed. Then his tablet lit up with an incoming message. He read it once. His expression immediately changed. The warmth vanished. Every trace of calm disappeared. My stomach tightened. "What is it?" I asked. Damien slowly lifted his eyes to meet mine. "The man who gave you the flash drive," he said quietly. "Someone just reported seeing him alive." For a second, I thought I had heard him wrong. The man from the parking garage. The frightened stranger who had pressed a flash drive into my hand and disappeared into the rain. The man I had assumed would never cross my path again. "That is impossible," I said quietly. Damien stood and walked toward the windows overlooking the city. The storm had finally passed. Sunlight reflected from skyscrapers and glass towers, turning Manhattan into a field of gold. Somehow it felt wrong. The city looked peaceful while my life continued unraveling. "The report came from one of my contacts downtown," Damien said. "The sighting happened less than an hour ago." I stared at him. "Then why did he not contact me?" "That is exactly the question I intend to answer." The determination in his voice was unmistakable. I watched him carefully. Most people reacted to uncertainty with anxiety. Damien reacted by becoming more focused, more dangerous, more impossible to read. "What if he is hiding?" I asked. "Then he has a reason." "What if he is afraid?" Damien looked at me. "Then he is afraid of the same people searching for you." The words settled heavily between us. I looked down at my hands. Everything seemed to connect back to that flash drive. Every question, every threat, every strange turn my life had taken. "I should never have accepted it," I whispered. "Perhaps." His answer surprised me. "But you did." "That is not exactly comforting." A faint smile touched his face. "I was not trying to comfort you." Despite everything, I laughed softly. The sound surprised both of us. It felt strange to laugh at all. The suite grew quiet again. Then Damien's phone buzzed. He checked the screen and frowned. "What now?" I asked. He hesitated. "Your friend Emily." My stomach tightened immediately. Emily Carter had been my best friend since nursing school. "What about her?" "Someone contacted her this morning pretending to be hospital administration." Cold fear moved through me. "Why?" "They were asking questions about you." I stood so quickly the chair nearly tipped backward. "Is she okay?" "She is fine." Damien's voice remained calm. "My people spoke with her 20 minutes ago." I released a breath I had not realized I was holding. "Thank God." He nodded once. "But it confirms something." "What?" "Whoever is searching for you is becoming impatient." The room seemed smaller again. The walls closer. The future less certain. I walked toward the windows and stared down at the busy streets below. Tiny yellow taxis moved between intersections. People hurried along sidewalks. Normal lives. Ordinary worries. I missed that life more than I could explain. "I want this to end," I admitted. Damien stepped beside me. Not too close. Just enough to remind me I was not facing it alone. "It will." "How can you be so sure?" His reflection met mine in the glass. Calm. Steady. Certain. "Because people make mistakes when they rush." Before I could answer, someone knocked sharply on the suite door. Damien's expression changed instantly. The warmth vanished. His security chief entered without waiting. One look at the man's face told me something was wrong. Very wrong. He handed Damien a photograph. Damien studied it for several seconds before turning it toward me. The image showed a crowded train station taken earlier that morning. My heart stopped. Standing in the center of the crowd was Emily Carter. And beside her was the same man who had given me the flash drive. My heart nearly stopped. I grabbed the photograph with both hands and stared at it, hoping I was mistaken, hoping the image was blurry enough to be misleading. It was not. Emily stood near the center of the station, wearing the same blue coat she always wore during cold weather. Beside her stood the man from the parking garage. The same exhausted face. The same dark jacket. The same stranger who had handed me the flash drive and disappeared. "Why is he with Emily?" I whispered. Nobody answered immediately. Damien took the photograph back and handed it to his security chief. "When was this taken?" 42 minutes ago, the man replied. "We confirmed the location." Damien nodded once. "Leave us." The security chief disappeared without another word. The moment the door closed, I turned toward Damien. "We have to find her." "We will." "No, you do not understand. Emily has no idea what is happening." "I understand perfectly." His voice remained calm, but there was something beneath it now. Urgency. Determination. I paced across the suite. Every terrible possibility rushed through my mind at once. What if Emily had been followed? What if the stranger had involved her without realizing the danger? What if she was already caught in the same nightmare consuming my life? Claire. Damien's voice stopped me. Look at me. I did. The photograph changes everything. How? Because it proves the man is trying to make contact. I frowned. With Emily? With you. The realization hit me slowly. You think he knows she is my friend? I know he does. Damien walked toward the fireplace and folded his arms. If he wanted to disappear, nobody would have seen him. Instead, he appeared in a crowded train station beside the one person most likely to reach you. My pulse quickened. He was right. The stranger had not been hiding. He had been sending a message. Then why not come here himself? I asked. Damien's expression darkened slightly. Because he is afraid. The answer hung in the air between us. Fear. That single word connected everything. The flash drive. The hospital. The people searching for me. The man had been running from something long before I met him. A sudden vibration interrupted my thoughts. My phone. I froze. Damien looked at the device resting on the table. We both knew it should have been impossible. Almost nobody had access to that number anymore. Slowly, I picked it up. An unknown text message glowed on the screen. My hands shook as I opened it. There were only 6 words. No greeting. No explanation. No signature. Just a location and a time. Grand Central Terminal. 5 o'clock. Come alone. I stared at the message. Then I looked at Damien. His jaw tightened immediately. You are not going, he said. But for the first time since entering the Moretti Grand, I was not so sure I had a choice. The message stayed on my screen while 1,000 thoughts collided inside my head. Grand Central Terminal. 5 o'clock. Come alone. I read it again. Then again. Each time hoping the words would somehow change. They did not. Damien stood across from me, silent and focused. Finally, he exhaled slowly. You are not meeting anyone alone. The message specifically says alone. People write many things. His voice remained calm, but I could hear the steel underneath. I looked down at the phone. What if he is trying to help? Then we will find out safely. 2 hours later, the city moved around us in its usual rhythm. Commuters rushed through Grand Central. Tourists admired the ceiling. Trains arrived and departed. Life continued. Yet my heart pounded so hard I could barely hear anything else. Damien had arranged everything carefully. Security remained distant and unseen. Nobody would interfere unless necessary. I stood near the central clock exactly as instructed. 5 o'clock arrived. Then 5:01. 5:02. Every second felt longer than the last. Then I saw him. The stranger from the parking garage stepped out from the crowd. He looked exhausted, relieved, human, not dangerous, just frightened. Claire, he said softly. Thank God. Before I could speak, Emily appeared beside him, completely unharmed, completely herself. She rushed forward and hugged me. I have been trying to find you for days, she said. I was so worried. Tears burned behind my eyes. The stranger waited until she stepped back. Then he reached into his coat and handed me a sealed envelope. Everything is in there, he said. Names, records, evidence. Enough to expose the people who have been hiding behind everyone else. Why me? I asked. Because you stopped when nobody else would. His answer was simple, honest. You treated me like a person when everyone else looked away. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the stranger smiled for the first time. You are safe now. He glanced past me toward the crowd. I followed his gaze. Damien stood several yards away, watching everything. Calm, protective, unshakable. The stranger nodded toward him. That man moved mountains to keep you alive. Then he disappeared into the sea of people before I could ask another question. The following weeks passed in a blur. Investigators received the information. Questions were answered. The people searching for me vanished from my life as quickly as they had appeared. My apartment was repaired. My hospital welcomed me back. Slowly, normal life returned. Yet something had changed. One evening, nearly 3 months later, I found myself standing once again inside the Moretti Grand. Not because I was running. Not because I was afraid. Because I wanted to be there. Damien stood near the same lobby where everything had begun. The chandeliers glowed above us. Guests moved quietly around the marble floors. The memory made me smile. You know, I said, most people meet in coffee shops. A rare smile touched his face. You collapsed into my lobby. I worked with what I had. I laughed. He offered his hand. Simple, steady, certain. I took it. Outside, the city lights stretched endlessly into the night. Inside, everything felt peaceful. Sometimes life changes because of a choice. Sometimes it changes because of a storm. And sometimes, when you are completely lost, you fall into exactly the place where you were meant to be found.